They say temptation is loud and reckless. But they're wrong. Sometimes, it walks in gently, no red flags. No warning signs. Just a familiar knock. At a door you thought was locked. It doesn't come with fireworks or forbidden glances across crowded rooms. It comes with comfort. With someone who knows how you take your coffee. With someone who remembers your birthday when your own husband forgets. It comes, softly. And that's what scares me the most. Because I didn't see it coming. I didn't plan it. I didn't fantasize about it. But it still happened. And now? Now I can't unsee the way he looked at me that night. I can't unfeel it. I wish I could tell you the story is clean. That it's black and white. But it's not. It's messy. It's complicated. It's human. This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's about the spaces between people. It's about silence in a marriage. It's about what happens when you feel like a ghost in your own home, when your body is there. But your heart? Your heart hasn't been touched in years. I was just trying to feel alive again. Not fall. Not fail. Not betray. Just breathe. You see, when you go so long without being seen, the first person who really looks at you, who really sees you, feels like salvation. Even when it's someone who should have been off limits from the start. Even when it's your stepson. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking. But before you turn away, before you judge me, I want you to hear everything. Because no one wakes up and says, today, I'm going to cross the line. No one sets out to break hearts or rules. Sometimes it starts with loneliness. With a dessert shared over laughter. With a spoon offered across the counter. With one moment that should have meant nothing. But meant everything. And even now, almost a year later, I still replay that night in my head. The way the air shifted. The pause between our words. The way he looked at me. Not like a child. Not like a friend. But like a man, wondering if I felt it too. And I did. God help me, I did. So, if you've ever found yourself walking a line you swore you'd never touch. If you've ever craved to be seen more than you feared being judged. If you've ever stood in the quiet between right and wrong, then maybe you'll understand me. And if you don't, that's okay too. This is my story. Raw, real, unfiltered. And I'm ready to tell it all. So stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where secrets don't hide, they whisper. And some truths? They're too haunting to stay buried. I'm 42. And for the past 7 years, I've been married to a man who barely looks at me anymore. We don't fight. We don't laugh. We just coexist. He comes home late. Always busy. Always tired. The first thing he reaches for is his phone, not my hand. I've stopped waiting up. Stopped asking how his day went. Stopped hoping he'd notice when I changed the sheets or changed myself. He didn't even notice when I cut my hair 10 inches. Didn't flinch. Didn't blink. I could be anyone. I could be no one. And some nights, I think that's exactly what I've become. Our house is beautiful. Big. Modern. Clean. Everything in its place, except us. We filled every room with furniture, but there's no warmth. No mess. No life. Just cold marble counters and carefully framed photos of a love that once had color. Now faded to gray. Then came David. My husband's son from a previous marriage. 22. He moved in for a few months, said he needed to save money, focus on school. I didn't mind. He was polite. Quiet. Helpful. He kept to himself mostly. But he noticed things. Little things. He asked about my day. He complimented my cooking. He told me the scent I wore reminded him of vanilla and Sunday mornings. My husband hadn't said a word about my perfume in years. Hadn't looked up from his screen long enough to even register it. But David looked. And it wasn't in a way that crossed lines, not at first. It was just human. It felt like sunlight in a room that had gone dark. I caught myself wearing that scent more often. Reaching for lip balm before I passed his door. laughing a little louder when he was around. I knew it was wrong to notice him that way. But what no one tells you is, you don't fall all at once. You drift. One look, one conversation, one small, almost invisible connection at a time. And it's not even desire at first. It's presence. It's someone asking, "Are you okay?" and actually waiting for the answer. That's what got me. Not the way he looked. Not his age. Not some wild fantasy. It was that he saw me. He listened. He noticed the way I sighed when I sat down. Asked if my back hurt. My husband never asked about my back. David did. And I wish I could say I kept my distance. That I reminded myself he was my stepson. That I never entertained a thought. But the truth? The truth is, when someone hands you water after years of thirst, you don't ask where it came from. You just drink. And that's where it started. Not with a kiss. Not with a touch. Just with someone seeing me. And me, forgetting, for a moment, who I was supposed to be. It was a Sunday afternoon. One of those slow, quiet days when the house feels too big. Too still. I'd found an old recipe card buried in a drawer, my mother's handwriting, faded at the edges. Her banana walnut bread. She used to make it every time someone needed comfort. And I guess, maybe I did. I pulled the ingredients out one by one, not expecting anyone to care. My husband was in his usual place on the couch, glued to a screen. I told him I was baking. He didn't even look up. Just mumbled, "I'm not hungry." He never is. I didn't answer. Just stirred the batter in silence. Let the smell of vanilla and cinnamon fill the kitchen. And then I heard footsteps. David walked in barefoot, hair messy, holding a half-read book in one hand. He paused at the doorway, looked at the bowl, and smiled. "Smells good," he said. I shrugged. "It's just banana bread." "Still smells good," he repeated, walking over to the island stool, sitting down like he'd done it 100 times before. He didn't ask if I needed help. He just grabbed a clean dish towel and started lining the baking tray. That small gesture, so simple, so quiet, touched something in me I didn't know was still sensitive. We moved around the kitchen like we'd done it before. Like we belonged there. I cracked a joke. Something silly, something about how my mother used to say the batter always tasted better than the bread. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. "Want to taste it before it's done?" I teased, offering him the wooden spoon. He hesitated, just for a second. Then smiled. That smile, half curious, half amused. Like he wasn't sure if I was joking or daring him. He leaned forward, licked the edge of the spoon, and laughed. She was right. The batter's better. I laughed too. But inside, I was still. Because for just a second, as he handed the spoon back, our fingers brushed. And he looked at me. Not in a way that was bold or inappropriate, but in a way that was aware. Too aware. His eyes held mine just a little longer than they should have. Not long enough to name it, but long enough to feel it. And in that tiny moment, barely more than a breath, the air in the room shifted. The kitchen, once cold and familiar, suddenly felt warmer, thicker, like something had been left open or unlocked. I looked away first, stirred the bowl again even though it didn't need stirring. He said nothing else, just sat there while I poured the batter into the tray. It was nothing. And yet, it wasn't. Something passed between us. Something silent. Something soft and dangerous. Like a thread being pulled taut. Too thin to see. Too real to ignore. That night, I told myself it was nothing. Just a moment. A look. A harmless exchange in a quiet kitchen. But my mind wouldn't let it go. I laid in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling while my husband slept beside me, his back turned. As always, body curled toward the wall like I didn't even exist on the other side of the bed. I listened to the silence, then to the faint hum of the hallway light, and beyond that, David's room. The soft creak of floorboards. The occasional turn of a page. He was awake too. I wondered if the moment lingered for him the way it did for me. I wondered if he was trying to shake it off just like I was. I closed my eyes and told myself to stop, to forget it. But my heart had already recorded it. That look, that brief warmth, the spoon, the brush of skin. I shifted under the covers. But nothing about that bed felt like comfort anymore. The next morning, I stood longer in front of the mirror. I didn't mean to, but I did. I brushed my hair slowly, applied lip balm twice, changed my blouse twice. Nothing too much, nothing obvious, just different. Something that said, I still care. But I told myself I was being silly. It's harmless. I just want to feel like myself again. And maybe that was true. Maybe that's all I was reaching for. But the truth, the deeper truth? I felt something, for the first time in years. Something sharp. Something alive. Not lust. Not fantasy. But presence. Like for a split second, I was back. Back in my own skin. Back in a body I hadn't recognized in a long time. Back in a version of me I thought was gone. And it wasn't really about David. It wasn't about him. It was about the version of myself I saw reflected in his eyes. She looked alive. She looked warm. She looked wanted. That scared me. Because once you see her, once you realize she's still in there, still breathing under all the dust and silence, you can't go back to pretending she doesn't matter. You can't go back to cold dinners and empty conversations. To the sound of cutlery clinking against dishes while your husband stares at a screen. To being background noise in your own life. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. That I was just lonely. That I was reading into things because I needed to feel something, anything. But the thing is, once your heart stirs, even a little, it doesn't go back to sleep. Not easily. And mine? Mine had just woken up. After that Sunday, things shifted. Not suddenly, not with any grand declaration, but with small, almost invisible steps. David started spending more time in the kitchen. He never said why. Just wandered in while I was cooking, leaned on the counter, asked questions he already knew the answers to. He watched me move like I was something worth paying attention to. And I didn't ask him to stop. He complimented my cooking, my earrings, the color of my blouse. Never in a way that felt forced or heavy, just observant. Like he noticed details no one else did. Like he wanted to. And for someone who had grown used to being unseen, that attention felt like oxygen. We started talking more. About books, childhood memories, random things. I'd tell a story, and he'd listen, really listen. Eyes on mine, no phone, no distraction. Just presence. And I laughed. God, I hadn't laughed like that in so long. Not the polite chuckle I gave my husband out of habit, but deep, real laughter that surprised even me. One evening, I was rinsing dishes, sleeves rolled up, water warm against my skin. David stood beside me, drying the plates. We moved in rhythm, passing dishes, wiping, stacking. Then our hands brushed. It wasn't intentional. But neither of us pulled away. We just stood there for a moment, fingertips resting lightly. Not enough to be called a touch. But far too much to call an accident. I looked at him. He looked at me. And in that split second, the room felt charged. Like the space between us was humming. But I didn't move. And neither did he. We just kept drying dishes like nothing had happened. But everything had. A few days later, I baked the banana bread again. Same recipe. Same bowl. Same scent filling the air. I told myself it was just a craving. That I wanted to feel close to my mother. But deep down, I knew. I wanted to see if he'd remember. He walked in like he always did, soft smile, hands in his pockets. I looked up from the bowl and said it again, without thinking, "Want to taste it?" He paused, then stepped closer. Closer than last time. I held the spoon toward him, but this time, I fed it to him myself. His lips brushed the edge. His eyes didn't leave mine. It was nothing. And it was everything. My hand trembled slightly. I hoped he didn't notice. But he did. I could see it in the way he swallowed, slow, deliberate. And then the front door opened. Footsteps. My husband. David stepped back quickly, wiped his mouth, went to the sink. I stood frozen, the spoon still in my hand. My husband walked in, briefcase in one hand, loosened tie around his neck. He looked at us, looked at the dessert, said nothing, but something in his eyes shifted. It wasn't suspicion. Not exactly. It was more like recognition. Like something in him finally noticed something that had always been there, quiet, waiting. He kissed my cheek out of habit, muttered something about being tired, and walked past us like we were furniture. But that moment, that breath of silence between his glance and his turning away, that was the last night anything between David and me could be called innocent. The night it happened, the sky broke open. Rain like needles against the windows. Wind howling through the cracks in the house like it was trying to warn me. I remember the way the thunder shook the walls low, deep, like something ancient groaning awake. My husband was out of town. Another conference. Another hotel bed. He barely told me goodbye. Just a nod, a rushed zip of his suitcase, and the sound of the front door closing behind him. The house felt emptier than usual. Too big. Too hollow. Like every room echoed with things we never said. I poured myself tea. Sat on the couch. Tried to focus on a book I'd read before. The words didn't stick. The storm made everything feel raw. And then I heard it. A sound I wasn't expecting. A scream. Short. Sharp. From down the hallway. David. I didn't think. I just moved. Bare feet on cold tiles, heart pounding harder than the thunder. His door was open a crack. I pushed it slowly. He was sitting up, drenched in sweat, breathing like he couldn't catch his own air. Eyes wild. Hands gripping the sheets. David? I whispered. He didn't answer. Just looked at me like he didn't know where he was. Or who he was. Like whatever he saw in that dream still had its hands on his throat. I crossed the room, sat on the edge of his bed, touched his arm. He flinched, then grabbed me. Not hard, not rough, just desperate, like I was the only real thing in the room. I wrapped my arms around him, held him the way I used to hold my son when he was little and afraid. But David wasn't a boy. He was a man. And this moment wasn't safe. He buried his face in my neck. His breath was warm, shaky. His fingers gripped the back of my robe. And I didn't pull away. I should have. God, I should have. But I didn't. I told myself it was just comfort. Just a moment. But the moment stretched. And then my robe slipped. Only slightly. Barely noticeable. But his fingers lingered. Not by accident. Not out of confusion. They stayed. He pulled back, just enough to look at me. His eyes searched mine. He wasn't crying anymore. He was just looking, seeing me. And I kissed him. He didn't lean in. I did. My mouth met his like it had been waiting. Like it knew. It only lasted seconds. But it shattered everything. We pulled back fast. Like the air burned. Breathless. Eyes wide. Hands trembling. He whispered my name. Barely audible. And I couldn't speak. The shame hit fast. Like a wave. Hot. Ugly. All-consuming. I stood. Too quickly. Almost fell. Didn't look back. I ran down the hall like a thief. Closed my door. Locked it. Pressed my back against the wood like I was trying to hold something in. Or keep something out. And then I looked in the mirror. And I saw her. The woman I swore I'd never become. The woman who crossed the line. Her lips were still parted. Her eyes wide with disbelief. And all I could think was, who the hell am I now? Because I didn't recognize her. Not at all. The next morning, the house was quieter than usual. Not just quiet, but tense. Like even the walls didn't know what to say. I made coffee with shaking hands, stared too long at the steam rising from the pot, hoping it would clear something in me. It didn't. David didn't come to the kitchen, didn't pass through the hallway, didn't speak. When I finally saw him, just for a second, he was by the stairs, backpack slung over one shoulder, keys in his hand. Our eyes almost met. Almost. But he looked past me, said, "I'm heading out," like it was any other day, and then he was gone. I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, holding a mug I didn't remember pouring, and everything just slowed. The guilt sat heavy on my chest. Not because of what we did, but because of what we both now carried. Silently. Alone. My husband came home that evening, suitcase by the door, the smell of stale airplane air clinging to his jacket. He hugged me like he always did, one arm, brief, distracted. Asked if dinner was ready before even removing his shoes. I nodded. Said almost. But my mind was elsewhere. Still in that room. Still tasting the moment I never should have let happen. I burned the rice. Forgot the salt. Spilled the wine. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did. But he didn't say a word. Just sat in his chair. Scrolled through his phone. Ate what he could. Left the rest. And somehow, that silence hurt more than any fight ever could. David stayed in the house for another 2 weeks. We barely crossed paths. When we did, it was brief. Polite. Distant. He didn't come to the kitchen as often. Didn't sit by the counter. Didn't offer to help. And I didn't bake. Not once. I avoided mirrors. Avoided my own thoughts. But guilt has a way of finding you, in the clink of a fork, in the creak of a door, in the middle of the night when you're staring at the ceiling. And he's just down the hallway. Then one morning, he told us he was moving out. Said he needed space. Said the commute to campus was getting too hard. Said he wanted to focus more on school. My husband just shrugged. Didn't even look up from his laptop. Boys need to grow up, he said, like it was nothing. Like David hadn't been living under our roof, eating at our table, sharing the air that now felt too tight to breathe. But I knew the truth. Something had broken. And it wasn't just between me and David. It was the final thread of illusion, the lie I'd been clinging to for years. I didn't lose my marriage that night. I lost the illusion that I was still in it. That it could be revived. That he saw me, needed me, loved me. The truth was, that version of us had died long before the kiss. The only difference now? I could finally see the ashes. I started journaling 2 nights after David left. I didn't plan to. I just needed somewhere to put the weight. Someplace private. Someplace that wouldn't look back at me with judgment. At first, I wrote about the weather. About what I cooked. About errands. But the pages didn't care for small talk. And neither did I. Eventually, the pen started writing what I'd been afraid to say aloud. Was it emotional starvation or emotional weakness? Had I spent so long being untouched that I mistook kindness for desire? Did I fall for David because he saw me? Or because I stopped seeing myself? And the harder question, would I have done the same if it had been someone else? If it weren't David? If it were a stranger, a coworker, an old flame? Would I have still felt that pull? Or was it something about him specifically? The timing, the nearness, the quiet way he made space for me in a world that had stopped making any. Sometimes, I think I was pushed. Not by David, but by the silence. By the nights spent lying next to a man who hadn't touched me in months. By the years of dinners eaten in silence. Of birthdays forgotten. Of tears wiped alone in a bathroom while the world kept turning. But other times, I know better. I know no one forced me. No one dragged me into that moment. I walked there, on my own 2 feet, eyes wide open. And still, I'm not sure where the line was. If it was crossed. Or if, by the time we stood in that room, the line had already vanished. Maybe it faded a long time ago when I stopped feeling seen. When my marriage became a calendar of silence. When I began measuring my worth by how invisible I could become without anyone noticing. I haven't told a soul. Not a friend. Not a therapist. Not even the page, not really. I still write in riddles. Still keep the truth behind metaphors. Because saying it plainly feels too final. Too bare. But every time I bake that banana bread, every time the scent of cinnamon and warm sugar fills the house, I see his eyes again. The way he looked at me that night. Not with lust. Not with confusion. But with something deeper. Something like ache. Something that mirrored my own. And that's the part one can't forget. Not the kiss. Not the robe. Not even the shame. But that look. That 1 second when someone saw me so clearly, it made me question everything I thought I was. And everything I was trying so hard to pretend I wasn't. Have you ever stood in a moment that blurred every line you thought you believed in? Have you ever reached for something not because it was forbidden, but because it was the only thing that made you feel real again? I ask myself that every day. Was I wrong for craving what my marriage no longer gave? Or was I just human? Is there ever a clean way to hunger? Is there ever a safe way to be invisible and still feel alive? I don't pretend to have answers. I only have my truth. And if you've been here, if you've ever crossed a moment you swore you wouldn't, I want to hear from you.